Chapter, chapter 18, Progressivism, Prohibition, and Politics. William Goebel, uh, he is the son of German immigrants. He spoke German as a child, attended and graduated Cincinnati Law School, uh, practiced in corporate and railroad law. Uh, he had a cool, aloof personality. Uh, he was an unusual politician. He never had a good, clear, he never had a good, clear speaking voice. He developed hatred for railroad monopolies. He didn't like crowds. He did have a slight accent. His father fought for the Union, but he was bold, brilliant, ambitious, audacious, but he didn't compromise. So Mr. Goebel, he's a Democrat, wanted to help laborers. He's a friend of the common man, and he wanted to control lobbies. Uh, he ran for governor in 1899 against Republican William Taylor. It would be a close vote. The Board of Election Committee would declare Taylor the winner, and Goebel goes to the Capitol to listen to the debates. And one day, Goebel he met an opponent in Covington. We're not sure what they discussed, what was said between them. They had a disagreement. Both pulled guns and fired one shot, and Goebel's opponent fell dead. Goebel went free. The widow's wife went to the insane asylum. Some would call Goebel a killer, while others said he was just defending himself. And Goebel would be called the Kenton King because he was from Kenton County. So just the beginning here of chapter 18 does end chapter 17 on pages 269, 269, 270. So there were shots fired again. Goebel was hit. Uh, he did linger for the hospital, in the hospital for 4 days. Uh, the assembly would declare Goebel governor, but who and why? Who shot Goebel and why? Lieutenant Governor J.C.W. Beckham would now be the governor. State government is not functioning financially. The Supreme Court would rule that there's no federal laws broken and they can't get involved. And so the Democrats, they do take control. And on February 3rd, 1900, William Goebel, again, he would die of his wounds. He would be the only governor in American history to die in office as a result of assassination. He had been chief executive of the Commonwealth for 3 days. The 44-year-old had survived the assassin's bullet just for a little over 100 hours. His last words, tell my friends to be brave, fearless, and loyal to the great common people. Governor William S. Taylor, who's under indictment from a partisan jury, is named as an accessory to the crime, and he flees the state. Numerous others were arrested, and eventually 3 men were convicted of the assassination. Republican Secretary of State Caleb Powers, who is said to be the mastermind of the plan. Henry Yahtzee, who was said to be an aide to the assassin, was also arrested. And James B. Howard, a man involved in the Clay County feud and the supposed assassin. Juries would be packed with Democrats. Most trial judges had been partisan supporters of Goebel, and several witnesses perjured themselves in giving testimony. 2 of the 3 convicted men appealed and won the right to a new trial from an equally partisan high court that had a Republican majority. As a result, Howard went through 3 trials, and Powers went through 4 trials during a 7-year period. In 1908, 8 years after the assassination, after the last Powers trial had ended in a hung jury, the governor pardoned Howard and Powers, and later he pardoned others who were under indictment. In 1916, Yahtzee would be paroled, and he would be pardoned in 1919. After Powers went free, he quickly ran for a seat in the U.S. House of Representatives, and he would win. The other 2 men would live a more quiet life, although they would be frequently asked, "Did you kill Goebel?" All claimed to be innocent. And because of the contradictory evidence and partisanship surrounding the case, the answer to the question of who killed William Goebel still remains mired in mystery and intrigue. Just some of the results of the assassination on Kentucky are just a little bit more clear. First, the event strengthened Kentucky's reputation as a violent place. Second, party lines were solidified as each group looked at the other with greater and greater distrust. A third effort is just a little bit less clear-cut. Some have argued then and now that the death of Goebel snuffed out the reform spirit in the state. However, this really wasn't the case, for reforms did occur and progressive legislation was enacted. Republicans would cry out that Democrats had stolen the governor's office from them. Democrats would figuratively wave the bloody shirt of Goebel before voters and label their opposition as murderers. And so again, Kentucky has the distinction of having a governor killed during the Civil War and a governor assassinated. So with who is J.C.W. Beckham? He is the grandson of a former governor. He's a native of Bardstown, Kentucky. He's a 3-term Kentucky representative. He's the lieutenant governor under Goebel. He would be called the boy governor, although this picture may not show it too well, but he was called boy governor because he looked so young and had a baby face. And so he would win a special election just to finish out the term. And as you read in your text, it does tell you that Mr. Beckham at age 30 was barely old enough to meet the constitutional requirements of the office. In truth, he probably owed his place on the Goebel ticket to the fact that he was what Goebel was not, from an old bluegrass family. Beckham's grandfather, Charles Wycliffe, again had been governor of Kentucky, and his uncle Robert Wycliffe, the chief executive of Louisiana. Many were uncertain whether he would even survive a special election in the fall of 1900 to fill the remainder of Goebel's term. As it turned out, Beckham showed very quickly his political acumen and became one of the state's major political leaders over the next 3 decades. So some of his accomplishments, he was less progressive. He tried to regulate insurance companies. He did build a new state capitol. He expanded the state normal school, which is now referred to as EKU. He also expanded West Kentucky State Normal School, which is WKU. There was a child labor law passed. That he did get passed, and he would run for a full second term. A couple of his failures, he couldn't control the violence. We still have just a lot of people shooting and killing each other. And then he also had to deal with the Black Patch Wars. After his governorship, he would later practice law, and as a U.S. Senator, he did get 2 military bases to come to Kentucky, which helped financially. The political bosses, if you wanted to get elected, you needed the backing of political bosses. Political bosses are local and could get out the vote and would contact you to find out how many votes your boy needed to win, and that's how many would show up to vote. The most famous political boss at the time was William Purcell Dennis. Most of the political bosses were Democrats, and they were Catholic. They operated behind the scenes. They were not elected. And they didn't do it for the money. That was not a motivator. They did it for power. They also provided aid to families. They gave allies positions of power. And they could ruin reputation with rumors. And so this is why they're just called kingmakers, because they're not above starting rumors. So again, just when they gave allies positions of powers, they just kind of got their friends in office to serve in positions that they really were not qualified to serve in, or that they may not have been qualified to serve with no experience. Progressivism was started mainly because of women, upper class women, both black and white women, as well as the churches. The progressives, they wanted to eliminate the evils of industrialization and keep the good. An example of an industrialization evil, just the smokestacks in factories, digging in the ground just to get the raw material. The positives, this did create more jobs with the factories. It gets more material out there at a cheaper rate. So it's more or less a double-edged sword. Different areas wanted different reforms. So there was no one unified goal. Some of just the reforms that some of the areas wanted: public health, business regulations, state welfare, morality. Reform required citizens to accept intervention and government role in reform. So social reform was education to change behavior, and social control was laws mandating change. So an example of social reform: let's say you have a young woman who's not taking care of her children. Her kids are sick all the time. She's investigated, and it's decided, come to a conclusion, that she's not educated. She needs to learn how to cook better, get some better cooking skills, uh, take take better care of her children, give her kids a bath. Uh, we need to get her educated to get her hit. We need to get her educated to get her kids healthy. So this is allowing you to change behavior. Social control. Again, just with the ninth example would just be the 19th Amendment. Uh, and another example is that you could pass a law stating that you can't quit school until you are 16 years old. Some social control examples, just some more. Prohibition, the Women's Christian Temperance Union. Anti-prohibitionist, again, industry brought jobs. As far as in this, the water quality is poor. Saloons provided drink and food. And so Kentucky would be the home of bourbon. It would become the home of bourbon. And by 1907, 95 of the 119 counties would be dry. The Black Patch War and Night Riders. Uh, the tobacco salvation crop, mainly just grown in western Kentucky. It was easy to grow, and farmers were attracted to it by its high prices. However, some referred to tobacco as the filthy weed. The American Tobacco Company plus two overseas group would control the market. The PPA, the Planters Protective Association, it's more of a grassroots affiliation to hold tobacco off the market. And there on page 280 in your text, 279, 280, it does give you just some more information about the Black Patch War. Uh, does tell you that some farmers, uh, those who are strapped for funds, did agree to continue to sell to the trust and to these so-called hillbillies. Uh, soon became the focus of violence, again in the dark patch tobacco areas of western Kentucky, and so they would be visited by night riders. known as the Night Riders or the Silent Brigade, lawless vigilante bands of men donned masks, took oath of secrecy, obeyed the orders of leader Dr. David Amos, paid dues, and rode across the region to persuade farmers who remained outside the pool. Warnings would be issued, perhaps tied to a bundle of sticks thrown on a porch, or perhaps tobacco plant beds would be destroyed or the crops burned in the fields. If this action did not produce results, people were beaten, sometimes with thorn bushes, and others were even killed. As one person noted, to join the Night Riders was both fire and life insurance. And I will stop here for part 1, and I will pick up with part 2.